I remember we were going forward, and they had the house, and there was they built on a mound, and they had this door you open up like that, and you can go underneath. They put stuff underneath, and we weren't supposed to be where we were. We're supposed to be behind the companies. We got stuck out here all by ourselves, and so they said, well, you see over at the house they got that door. Just to be sure, get over there and throw a couple of nades in and make sure that nobody's after you. So I got sent over there, and I said, no. I could hear talking. I hear the talking, and so I says, I'd say, "Nicht and hand the hole." Figuring it might be Germans. But then I hear some other talking. I hear little kids. I open up the door. Here's a family of 5. So when the guy that told me to go over there and throw a grenade in it, I still think about that. Awake in the middle of the night sometimes, and I think about that. I can still see the 5 and 3 kids and the mother and dad. You don't forget that. Yeah. Our local cop, we had a local policeman. His name was Buer. And I'll jump ahead. He ended up being a sergeant major, but we went to the boxcars, and they used to have the racks, and after they used to ship the apples and so on in bulk. So we sneak into the boxcars and open them up afterwards, and lift up the rack and get all the apples that fell through the cracks. And he caught us. This guy is Nels Buer. Nels Buer. What are you doing there? He says, well, all these apples are going to go rotten. He says, what kind of apples are they? And he took a bite of it. He says, they're not bad apples, are they? I said, they're Macintosh. So he said, okay. I said, we have a couple extra bags. So one of the guys took one of the bags that we had, and he opened up they had the cruiser car. He opened up the cruiser car and he put a bag in the back seat. We put a bag in the back seat. What did you? Yeah, we put there's no use taking it out now. We put it in the back seat so you can maybe try the apples to your kids or somebody else or another policeman. And he was treated us pretty good. And so who was one of our sergeant majors? But it was Buer. Yeah.
That's fun.
And I remember I went AWOL. This is another story. I went AWOL, and I come back, and I went to a field punishment camp, which it's 12 to 14 days. But you had to come there with all your kit. And if one little thing missing, they send you back to your unit to get that kit. The count is 1 day. So I had 14 days. They sent me back because I was missing a thimble out of the housewife. And that was one you had for housewife was needles and threads and so on, and I was missing something, and so I had to go back to you, and I come back again. So this was a big sergeant major was big red, and I said when we were riding the freights in Winnipeg, we'd take a ride and go up and we get off, and there's a hobo jungle, they weren't really hobos, but they call them hobos. And it was right adjacent to the railway track. The policemen would come along. The railway police would come along and they'd talk, but you weren't on their property, but it was okay. And they'd stop for coffee, and they said, you don't go on that property, we'll have to arrest you. And his name was he said, that's so Big Red, eh? The big red-headed guy. Oh, yeah. So I ended up getting field punishment camp, which meant I was I had to go to this camp where they keep people, field punishment was field punishment. And you take off all your badges and so on and so forth, and everything's done on a double. And who was in there? This Big Red. So we stopped for it. It was mandatory no matter where you were. If you were in a field punishment camp or on parade somewhere, 10 minutes to the hour you stopped and had a break. So we stopped. So we have a big mouth. You weren't supposed to talk to these guys. And I says, staff, were you ever up in southern Saskatchewan with the CPR police? He looked at me, he said, who said that? I said, me, staff. well, he says, what are you doing up there? And I told him what had happened, and so forth and so forth. And before we did that, we came into the camp. He had tents here, and had a wall, and the wall was white, a white wall. And we all lined up. And he said, when I could turn around and face that white wall, it was black. You turn around and face that wall, that white wall. So we turned around, he said, about turn. So everybody else, I said, it's that black wall, but he said it's white. You stay there. Everybody else turned around, but me. Is there only a Winnipeg rifle? You know the color of bloody black and white? I always knew that if he said that way, he said it, right? The other guys aren't smart enough for that. And, they all got extras. And so I had 10 more days in the camp, and I had extra things to do. So he put me on a truck that went around and delivered coal to all the huts. And the other guys are doing all kinds of fatigues and other works. And I'd get finished about 10:30, and the driver of the truck went in for coffee break. So I went in for coffee break. So this happened all the time, the whole time I was there. All because he's, he's Big Red from the CNR policeman.
So I think it would be interesting for younger people to learn about why you decided to join up. You were underage when you were like 16, right?
15, yeah.
Could you tell me about that story?
Oh, well, the war just broke out, and my dad had been in World War I, and as kids, we heard all these stories, and I'd been a cadet. And I was actually, not only as the cadet, I was in the reserve forces, and so I knew all the drills, I knew all the things to say, when to keep quiet, when to say yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir, and all that sort of stuff. So when I joined up, and I'd been a cadet, and the sergeant who's signing up the new people, he said, "What are you doing here?" I says, he was the Cameron Highlanders, where you put an ad in the paper. They're recruiting 70 people. Says, "I'm joining the Camerons, Sergeant." "You joining the Camerons?" He said, "Yep, you're already in the Camerons, but this is the active force. I want to join the Camerons." "Okay, get over there. You got to go over there and get signed up." And he knew my age and all. I'd been one of his cadets for a while. So I was just 15. And on the 18th of September, on the 22nd, I turned 16. So I joined when I was 15, but only 5 days before I was turning 16. So I got away with it because I look at some of the pictures and I said, Jesus, you look around and says, what's he doing here? you look, everybody else, mature guys and so on, and there's always a couple of young guys like me stuck in there. Yeah, you could tell.
How did you go from the Camerons to the Rifles? What was the transition there?
The transition was the 3rd Division Rifles were in the 3rd Division, and what they did is they had, in order to they took all the people that were there. They say they had 800 people. You had to get rid of the sick, lame, and the lazy. So you clean those guys out. That meant you were short-handed. So you had to go to the recruiting depot and pick people to replace them. So I was on guard duty, and my brother had been in the camp at Port Osborne, and they come around at night and they said, "We're looking for people to go to the Winnipeg Rifles." And my brother put my name down to join, and I come off duty. They said, "You got a 48-hour leave." "Oh, 48-hour leave, what's that for?" He said, "Well, you're now going to be a member of the Winnipeg Rifles." And then I got the whole story. He volunteered my name to go with him. So I ended up, I had my 48-hour pass, but actually turned out longer because it was a weekend, and my weekend plus the 48-hour Monday and Tuesday. So I actually had 4 days off. So it turned out pretty good that way.
That's great.
Yeah. So that's how I ended up going into the Winnipeg Rifles. I used to wear that Cameron hat,
Yeah.
the tam o' shanter. Yeah.
When you joined the Rifles, how soon after were you sent over to England?
Oh, that's let's see, that was in just a matter of 2, 3 months. That was in June, and we were sent over. There's a big riot in Halifax, and the Rifles belonged to the third div. We were not supposed to go to March 42 because it's a big riot. They thought, well, a lot of the members of the third division were involved with the riot, so we figured, well, let's get rid of these guys. We'll ship them overseas. So they ended up shipping us overseas. That was the reason we got shipped over early. At least I find this is what they said afterwards, because we were due to go in March, but we ended up moving in September. Yeah, we left on the 29th of August, and we left on the let's see, the 16th of August. We left on the SS Rita from Halifax, and it took 16 days to get to Liverpool, England. We were in a convoy, and they said there were 105 ships in the convoy. And we took turns being on guard at night with our Sten gun standing on deck. What the hell are you going to do with a Sten gun standing on deck in the middle of the ocean? But they had us on deck with a Sten gun. Yeah. So they're good, accurate for 25 yards, eh? Then they sort of spread out a bit.
Yeah.
Because they...
did they have you trained on a Sten, or did you start?
You know what the Sten gun was made for?
Yeah.
They developed it for the dropping into France. It's for the underground. And so what they did is they made it 9mm. The reason they made it 9mm, because the Germans used 9mm in their submachine guns and their pistols. So that when the Sten gun was put over, they could use German ammunition in it.
Smart.
It made sense. Yeah.
Were you so when you were trained in? I'd imagine you were trained home, but in England as well. So you get to England in 1942. What is it for then between the 2 years from 42 to 44?
Well, we did all kinds of training. Because I got over there in 41, eh? So we did all kinds of training when we're stationed at South Downs. And the South Downs, they're still thinking that the Germans might make an invasion. But later on, they were involved with Russia, so the chances of them coming invading England was less. But for a while, we were Defense of England. So that's why we got a Defense of England medal. It's a green medal. So for Defense of England. Yeah.
June of 1944 is the landings at Normandy on Juno Beach.
Yeah.
In the months before D-Day, did you have a sense that something was about to happen?
First of all, we sent to Scotland for 3 weeks, what you call salt landing training. And we started off one platoon, a company. Then we started going one platoon with live ammo, a company with live ammo. And we actually had 11 casualties up there. The guys ended up getting, a little bit of wreck. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they used live ammunition. I'm talking about artillery too. And they got a bit of shrapnel and so on. So we had about 11 guys that got wounded in a big exercise in Scotland. And that's where we were up in the loch, and the loch was similar to it. It was sandy. It was sort of it's similar to the land Normandy. At the time, we didn't know that was similar to the land of Normandy. And the funny thing happened to me. You can edit this out afterwards. I had an upset stomach, and I'm sitting in I had a Bangalore torpedo, which is a long pipe, and my job was to put it underneath this barbed wire and strike it. But I had an upset stomach. I had to go to the John real fast. So I got on and I ran like hell for this barbed wire, and I struck it, and I took off for the bush. It actually blew the hole in there, and I actually did my job, so it worked out okay.
That's great. As long as you did your job, that's the important thing.
It's nothing worse than that happened. It's similar to this, when we were over in Normandy, we had a dysentery, an upset stomach. So when you get out of the trench, You had to dig a little hole, do your business, fill it up, and get it back in your trench. And some guys, one guy was, he was with somebody else, and the fellow he was with didn't want to get out, so he used a wash basin. So this guy said, "Oh, the hell with that." So he left him, but no, that guy was all by himself. He wouldn't get all by himself. Yeah.
That's funny. So now I'd like to go to D-Day itself.
Yeah.
You were with the Rifles. You landed right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Could you tell me from start to finish, June 6th, 1944?
Well, we were the mortar carriers, and we were going in, but our landing craft tank got damaged. They dropped us some mortar carriers off in the water, and our first two mortar carriers off, they submerged, so we swam in, and then the guy, what happens? He thought he hit the shore, but he hit a shoal. He dropped us in the water beyond the shoal, which was too deep. Then he moved in close and dropped the rest off. And we heard later on that the guy got court-martialed for it. That's the word come back. Oh yeah, the guy that did that. And because we lost two carriers with the mortars. The mortars we got them back later, but they gave us two trucks instead of a mortar carrier. But the mortars, we had to put them on the truck instead of a Bren gun carrier. Yeah. So I ended up swimming in, and there was on the way in, we plopped it on the ground, and there's one guy, Corporal Scaife, he'd be badly wounded. And I took his Sten gun and took his grenades, and I got up into the Sandown. Then there's another guy called Corton Martin. He could be badly wounded, too. But the other, Scaife, was going to be gone. But the other guy, Martin, he didn't seem to be that he'd go that quick. We pulled him at the Sandown, and we're waiting for the rest of the people to come in, because the other mortar carriers were supposed to come in after us. But our mortar carriers were in the water with everything in it. And what made me so bad, man, I had a camera with a whole bunch of extra films. I was going to take all kinds of pictures. I lost them all. I would have scooped the Toronto Star. No, I had the eight rolls of film, and he took I forget how many pictures on each roll. And I was going to take pictures. I took pictures on the landing craft going in, and as we're approaching, but everything went. I lost it all. Pretty rough going in.
Yeah. See,
they didn't want us there, the Jerry, so they let us know. There's all kinds of mortars and machine gun fired, and then once we got in further, there was no firing because they'd taken out the guns, eh?
How long did it take to take the beach and establish a beachhead?
I don't know. It was pretty. According to what I read, or I can just tell you that 10 or 12 yards on either side of me. We done what we had to do. We got in. We got our part. And everybody else got their part. But then we got into a place. I don't know what. It might have been the second day in. We got into this place called Puteaux. Puteaux is they got in around there, and they spread us around the other mortar carriers, but they needed somebody for the runner, so they grabbed me for a runner, because I wasn't one of the mortar crew anymore. I didn't have mortars, so I did a lot of running for. And who's I running for? My old cop, Nell Spear. He said, "Jimmy, come here." Now I wasn't feeling so good. I said, "I don't feel so good. I swallowed a lot of seawater." I said, "I don't feel so good." Well, go over there as soon as you're finished. If you're not being sick, join me up. So I got over after a little while. I barfed up a lot of seawater. It's, the North Sea water is not as tasty as the other water. I could just think about the water and going in, and I waited by this. We went over after we were waiting by the sand dune. We went by this pillbox. The Jerry's were the pillbox was neutralized. We didn't know it was. But there was 5 Germans in there. We didn't know that. Some engineer guy come over, the Vulcan engineer. He said, "Anybody in there?" I said, "We don't know." So he walked in there and he come up with five German soldiers. He got the military medal.
Wow.
So were they already there? Yeah. Yeah, they go, no, Sergeant. Yeah, he got the military medal to take out the pillbox. So, gee, we're already there. Yeah.
Could have just gone in. Yep.
They were quiet because they're surrounded with. They're not going to do anything. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and the weeks after, obviously, there's quite intense fighting. The Germans sent sort of their best guys after the Canadians as well.
Yeah.
With
Always,
the SS.
Hitler Youth. Yeah. We got the first. There's some of the prisoners we got were Mongolians. So they used they used prisoners to capture to do all kinds of things, and they put a regular soldier in charge of them. So we had all these different Mongolians and other people that were not Germans, and it'd be German officers and sergeants in charge of them. And they threatened to throw their family in or whatever. Yes. But this Mongolian guy, he's so obviously Mongolian, he's about 6 feet tall, and he looked like a Mongolian, yeah.
What was the fighting like in Normandy after you landed? Once you had been sort of established in the French countryside, for you, what was the experience?
Well, even we dug in and so on and so forth. Always mortars, always shelling. They never run short of shells. And they had the moaning minis. You heard of the moaning minis? What they do? They were 6 barrels, and they're rockets, and they make it one rocket after another, so it'd sound like and it get several of them. There's 4 in a battery, so that means there's 16 mortar bombs would go. They wouldn't all go at once, so you hear the moaning. So that's what they call the moaning minis. And then they had the MG42, which you could tell what they were. So they sound 1,200 rounds a minute, and that's pretty fast. And ours are 600 and 700 rounds a minute for a Bren gun, because it's the Brits are always made sure that they didn't expend too much, not only in arms, but they lost a lot of people, and so they used as much artillery as they could. That means they would less people would kill going forward. You read that afterwards. I read why did they do all this stuff? They had to protect the amount of people they had. They lost so many in World War I. The next generation, there weren't that many, and they lost quite a few in Africa and so on. So their whole idea of lots of artillery was to make sure you lose less men going forward. So that's a good philosophy they had.
Yeah.
And so we followed the same.
There was a story I was listening to from you from a few years back. You told someone else, but what I vaguely recall of it is that you were sort of up, you were on your own, and a company might have left you behind, and you heard some Germans like feet away from you. What could you sort of tell me about that story?
Well, that was around Puteaux. Some Puteaux is that so that they pulled back, and I didn't know they pulled back. It was at nighttime, and we're sort of in a trench, and this Bob Hussey and I were. He says, "Where in the hell is the rest of them?" He said, "I don't know." He says that they must have gone somewhere. So he went checking around. He found another guy, and he said, "Oh, they've gone back about 200-300 yards to where B Company is." So we thought, "Oh, geez, we better get the hell out of here. We're just going to start going, and we hear all this chattering. So we better keep quiet." And this is, I guess, a patrol. A bunch of Germans went by talking, and we just on the other side of the bush, we just kept quiet until then we went back to where other people were. Yeah. That was at night,
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any other sort of illustrative stories from France, before we go into the Netherlands and whatnot, from France itself that you think would be good for young people to sort of know about, to illustrate sort of how the conflict was?
Yeah. Before I forget, at that time of year, it was June, and it'd be daylight till pretty late. Then it'd sort of be twilight for quite a bit. So it's still daylight, till twilight till about 11:30. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, it was already starting to get light again. It hadn't really got dark. So that part of June, eh? We're right in the June the 6th to the 21st. We got all the daylight hours and so on and so forth. And what were you saying about the other?
I was going to say, I mean, because a lot of young people are going to watch this, I guess it would be useful if you could tell a story or illustrate to them sort of how the conflict was in France.
Yeah.
If there's a story you think is good to tell that.
Yeah, well, it's a good story be around about Buteau because got to know a few French families there. They didn't take off. They're smart. They would have take off, but they stayed in their houses. In their houses in Normandy, a lot of the buildings and so on are 300 or 400 years old. So the Normans, and the people's houses are all brick or stone and so on, and even the floor was a smooth stone, real flat stone. It's been used for years, eh? They've been the family generation, and the actual place they live in, and they had their gardens and everything else have been the same gardens they've been using for a few generations of families. In that part of Normandy, I'm talking about. I was amazed at all the old buildings. Every time you went in, it was like being in a fort. So it's like the walls are about, it'd be square. It'd be about 100 feet all around. And built into the walls would be a house. It'd be the barn and other sheds and so on were built in as part of the, so it was like being in a fort because he had being surrounded by 100 foot or 100 feet, 100 feet, 100 feet, and had the buildings built into it. It's if you go there now, it's still you can still something like that. We dug in to a trench, eh? No matter where you were, first thing you do is dig a bloody hole to protection position. And normally there's always shell fire, machine gun fire. There's always something going on, And you say with the Germans had the 88. That turned out to be the best artillery gun on both sides in World War II. It was actually built for ack-ack. So it meant the muzzle velocity of an 88 was 2,200 feet per minute, per second. That meant when it left that muzzle, it was traveling at 2,200 feet per second when it left that muzzle. That's how fast it was going. It was an anti-tank, but it could be also used for high explosive. And what they used for was what they call it, the airburst. It explode about 20 feet off the ground, and the shrapnel would come down. So we had to watch for the airburst. It's 20 to 30 feet above, and it explode. And they'd been on the area for the war for a while, and they knew all the distances and when to change the elevation and so on. And it was our artillery. They were learning as they're going along, They could still do it, but I mean, they were used to where if that farm was only 400 yards away, where the Canadian people would calculate 400 or 500 years, but they already knew 400. Yeah.
So you make your way through Normandy, and then
that's the express.
Yeah, and it just sort of comes through and whatnot.
Yeah, it's the express. What they call it, the Mount Albert Express. Yeah.
I guess the railroad's just right there, right?
That's the main line.
Wow, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, you get on there and go to Vancouver, Halifax. Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah. I could take it back tomorrow if I wanted. Yeah. So you fight your way through Normandy with the rifles, and then you end up in the Low Countries, Belgium and the Netherlands, and the Netherlands being particularly important because the Canadians were the main ones who liberated the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Oh, there are a lot of dikes and polders. You know what the polder is? The polder, well, actually, you had dikes built around, and the land is recovered. And that's why you had the polder was the recovered land. And in Holland and parts of Belgium, there's a lot of what you call polders, where they reclaimed the land from the sea. And so they have dikes all around. And the dikes have been there so long, There's roads on them, there's trees on them, and there's and the polders in between we use for it's usually 8 to 10 inches below the ground was water level. But they'd been using that for farming. They knew exactly whatever they wanted to use it for. And we had to dig our motors in. We had to make sure that after a while they'd sink in. It was soft. So we take up the base plate and put the empty shell casings in the hole, and you then put it on top so it wouldn't go too far down. So that way it would be firmer. Yeah.
Mm. And so when you got to the Netherlands, I'd imagine you met a lot of civilians when you were there going through. What were their reactions?
Oh, they're glad to see us, yeah. See, we didn't, it was more subdued. All the things you see in the picture, welcoming them and all that, that's the rear echelon troops, they got that. But near the front, they're worried about being safe as well as we are. So there's a different type of welcoming by those people. And I remember we were going forward, and they had the house, and they built on a mound, and they had this door you open up like that, and you can go underneath. They put stuff underneath, and we weren't supposed to be where we were. We were supposed to be behind the companies. We got stuck out here all by ourselves. And so they said, well, you see over the house, they got that door. Just to be sure, get over there and throw a couple of nades in and make sure that nobody's after you. So I got sent over there, and I said, no. I could hear talking. I hear the talking, and so I says, I'd say, "Nicht and hand the hoe," figuring it might be Germans. But then I hear some other talking. I hear little kids. I open up the door. Here's a family of 5. So when the guy that told me to go over there and throw a grenade in it, I still think about that. I wake in the middle of the night sometimes, and I think about that. I can still see the 5 of them, 3 kids and the mother and dad. You don't forget that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that's.
That's when I see those doors. When I see doors now, I think of that too. Like that.
So you go through the Netherlands. What is the combat like when you're there? You're in the mortars at that point. So what was that like for you? What was sort of the daily activities?
Oh, yeah, we had to. We're always looking for spots that, especially where the dikes were. And the side of the dike, there's 2 sides. There's the German side and our side. So whenever we dug a trench or something, we dig it on our side, because we dug in for protection on the dikes, because the ground wasn't any good. 6 inches, 7 inches below was the water table. And like I said, we put our mortars down. We put the ammunition boxes, empty ones, down first, because they would sink in the water, especially when you fire a few rounds, Yeah. And we had to make sure, because being a mortars, you had to make sure you weren't exposed to machine gun fire. So you always try to get behind a house or behind some dikes or something, and that way you wouldn't be exposed, only be exposed for shell fire. Right. You could always get cover for that.
I think a lot of people who are younger, they haven't really seen anything in the way of war. Our armed forces haven't gone to conflict since Afghanistan in 2014.
Yeah.
So emotionally, how was it? Because as I mentioned, my great-grandfather never talked about it. A lot of people had shell shock and whatnot.
I could talk about it.
Yeah.
I've always done about it. Yeah. No, not the nitty-gritty. I can tell you about the different guys being wounded and so on. Like Corporal Scaife, was mortally wounded, and Corporal Martin. Those that's the first ones I remember, was on the beach, going in on the beach. Yeah.
Probably sticks with you. Doesn't it?
Oh, that does. The first group, yeah. The first group does. And at Carpiquet Airport there's a few that we lost, a few there. And I'll jump ahead a bit. This in December, near Christmas time, and we had a signal guy We had signals officers, and we had the signal people who they had a big 18 set, and they were posted out to different companies and different platoons. And that way we had this Doug Dowling, he was posted to our platoon. He had an 18 set, which is his contact with headquarters, had greater range and so on. And he was supposed to get called back and said, well, the word is that his mother in Canada was very ill and wasn't sick to live. So Doug Dowling, he got permission to go back to Canada. So he left us, and he was crossing the field going to battalion headquarters. He shelled at it, he killed him. Yeah, what a fate that was, eh? So I always remember Doug Dowling. He was always sharply dressed, always had a nice crease in his trousers and everything. He's sharp, always sharp, eh?
Do you think, I mean, it's hard to think about this in retrospect, but do you think, you survived because you were lucky or because of skill? Like, what was it, do you
My
think?
brother always said I had 29 lives, not 9. Yeah. I went through a lot of scrapes. Gordon, I was played in a split trench a couple of times. So the first time we dug in, and Bob Hubsey, my other guy on the trench, he's sitting at the far end, sitting at the far head, and all I hear, there's shelling going on, and all I remember was a white flash. That was actually the shell landing nearby, and we had a parapet we built. When you dug the ground up, you put a parapet on the edge of the trench. It landed right on the trench, and it partially buried me and covered me with all kinds of dirt. And the next thing I know, I feel tugging on my helmet. Bob Hussey, my buddy, he's trying to get the dirt off my head, and he's pulling my helmet, and he's tugging on my head. It woke me up. So Carper K, though, that was a bit worse because when we left the trench, we had to move to another place about 50, 60 yards away, and they still shelled the old place. And where they shelled, they hit the trenches that we're in. So we had to stay there. We would have been finished, yeah, because the trench I was in was the shell landed on the edge, and the dirt was inside. So the shrapnel might have got us,
I've done a lot of research into the Second World War in Western Europe, and something I often find is people say the Canadian infantry were known especially to be very strong. And you look at like the German field reports, and they always would appear to say, the Canadian infantry were the most fearsome. Why do you think, the Canadian infantry divisions gained that sort of reputation?
Well, you know what Rommel said? Canadians fight like hockey players. I think it was Rommel said that. He said to fight like hockey players. Yeah, the Canadians are known to be. The Brits are pretty good at defensive all that, but Canadians didn't know what the hell they do. Didn't know what the Canadians would do. We just do what we had to do. Where the British were always very good defensive like. The Canadians were good at going forward, on the attack, and on the defensive. They're good at everything. Yeah, like you said, they fight like hockey players. Yeah.
Huh. Before I wrap this up, I just wanted to ask you, I mean, you've lived through 101 years of world history and Canadian history.
Yeah.
The project I'm doing is looking at, what does it mean to be Canadian? Since you were born in the 1920s,
24.
Yeah.
The year of the rat.
Yeah, there you go. 1924. How has Canada changed? You look around culturally and whatnot. How is Canada different now than it was back then?
Well, I think I was brought up during the 30s, and there wasn't much freeloading going on. You know what I mean? We used to go actually right too far from us. There used to be a railway track that backed onto what they called the soup kitchen. The soup kitchen in the 30s they fed people twice a day because a lot of people were out of work and it was Depression time, and there's all kinds of. there's maybe 300 or 400 people come into the soup kitchen. They have 2-3 sittings. You'd be able to sit 200 people in a mess hall. So they have a sitting starting at 11:15 and another at 11:45, and they'd come in. And so they had where the wall was, and then the soup kitchen, and then there's a cookhouse. And we used to run messages from the cookhouse, and they'd give us a piece of pie. Or we'd say, is there any of the stew left over? We'd always carry a little something if you come to stew. And it's the guys, and they'd always made sure we we run messages for cigarettes or something like that. And they were always, the people in the kitchen were regular guys, they were nice people. Some people would be miserable, eh? Yeah. But these guys are always pretty good fellows. They look at us little guys and they say, oh, these guys they're starving. You know, you figure out these 8, 9, 10-year-olds hanging around the soup kitchen to get something to eat.
Hilarious.
Well, we don't have much money and no much food at home. You really lay it on thick, you know. Yeah. Because during the summers when most people got jobs and had extra money, and in the nighttime, in the wintertime, they'd be going relief. Relief is when you're able to go and get, if you had a family of 5, you get so many coupons to get rations, you'd be able to go and get grocery stores and so on. And you had to work for it. They had jobs for you. They had places around the city like lumber yards and so on. So you go and work in the lumber yard, and they get the parents the dad would get these coupons, which was good for groceries. It's crazy. That's when we did it. And I know when we used to go. There was a lumber yard nearby, and they had a coal. There's a coal bins. So we'd sneak into the coal bin at night and try to grab the odd coal bin, because in our house we had a furnace in the basement, but we also had a big stove, a big Quebec heater in the front living room. And it was 40 below zero, and weren't insulated very well. And they'd get the big lump of coal in there. It'd burn a long time. What they call the anthracite. It takes a long time. You look under the big orange ball. It just burn and give heat. Plus, my dad would go down 2 or 3 times a night to throw in logs or whatever he had to put in the furnace to keep them freezing. Yeah, because the houses weren't well insulated. I remember we about 10 and 11. My sister was older. She was young. My mother was married twice. Her husband was killed in World War One, so they had a group. And then my dad his wife died in the Spanish flu in the late 1920 or 21, and so on and so forth. So there's different ways of getting the groceries together and how you looked after your food and so on.
Right.
And they always, everybody was doing the same thing. And like I said, getting it into the soup kitchen was a good way of getting extra food, right?
Right.
I'm sort of digressing here sometimes.
No worries. No, it's interesting, and I mean, it paints the picture well. I have one last question, and this is like sort of broad, just because my project's all about Canadian identity. In your view, what does it mean to be Canadian?
Well, just sitting right here, it's nice. You got the freedom to be here. I can do what I want, when I want, under certain circumstances.